Hello, in this video we will be finishing off lesson 2.10. So previously we added 5 different labels and set some of the constraints on the labels. So each one of the labels is 20 pixels away from each other and they are centered horizontally. So if I go ahead and click on one of the labels, and if we look on the constraint, we're centered horizontal, and then we have 20 from Loves to Read and 20 from Mike Bogner as far as the distance between the labels. The exercise was a bit repetitive. Managing constraints on multiple elements can be tedious, especially when the position of each element is the same distance from the previous one. What if you decided later to have 30 pixels of separation between labels instead of 20? Or what if you want all of the labels to be positioned on the left side of the parent instead of in the center? You would have to update each constraint. So Interface Builder has provided a smarter approach. Rather than creating and updating numerous individual constraints, you can use the StackView to automatically manage the constraints of its child views. A single StackView manages either a row or column of interface elements and arranges those elements based on the properties set on the StackView. So let's go ahead and add the 5 labels to a StackView. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click and select all of the labels. So all of my labels have been selected. You can tell over on the left hand side that they are currently selected. And then what I need to do is in the bottom right hand corner there's a little embedded in button. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and what I want to do is I want to embed in a stack view. So let me just go ahead and click on that. And now what you can see is that we now have a stack view, and inside that stack view are our 5 labels. The other thing you'll notice is that all of the constraints that were previously set on our labels have been removed. So before we go ahead and proceed, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set some constraints on our stack view. So let me just go ahead and make sure my stack view is selected, and then I will go ahead and select Add New Constraints. So let me just go ahead and select that, and I will set my top equal to 0, and then both the leading and trailing edge will be set to 0. So let me just tab over to the leading edge, click in my trailing edge, set that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set the height of our stack view to a specific value. So we're going to go ahead and set our height equal to 300. So after I've done that, I want to click my Add 4 Constraints button, and we will go ahead and add those. So now we've added our 4 constraints, and as you can see, it has changed the way our labels are being laid out. The one thing you'll notice that there is a constraint error, but we're going to disregard that in the next few steps, the next few items that we go through. So the next thing I am going to do is I am going to go ahead and change the color of my label so we can see what changing some of our stack view properties changes the size of those labels and the way they are laid out. So let me go ahead and select my first label, and I will go ahead and go into my view, my attributes inspector, and then down in my view I want to go ahead and change the background. So let me just go ahead and select that, and I will go ahead and go down to my custom, and within the crayons I'm going to select different colors. So the first one I'm going to set to the color salmon, so I'll click on that. I will go ahead, select my second label. I will select lime. So that is the third row, the fourth item. The third label, what I'm going to do is select silver. So that's in row 1, number 10. The fourth label is I am going to go ahead and set that to lavender, which is in the fourth row, the 10th item. And then the final label, what I'm going to change is I'm going to change that color to ice, which is the fourth row in the 7th item. Okay, so now I've updated my colors, my label background, so now I can see what happens when I change the various StackView properties. So let me go ahead and select my StackView and make sure my attribute inspector is open. So it is open. So the first property that we're going to talk about is axis. So axis just determines whether the elements within the view are stacked vertically or horizontally. Since our labels were arranged vertically, the interface builder automatically positioned our labels into a stack view. So if I go ahead and select horizontally, it definitely doesn't make sense to have those labels laid the way they are, so I will go back to vertical. So the second property is the alignment property, and that just describes how the elements within the stack are positioned. So they're currently aligned basically in our stack centered. So what I'm going to do is I will just go ahead and change the alignment to fill. And what fill does is each of the elements fills the size of the stack. So now each one of my elements, each one of my labels extends to the full extent of our stack view size. So that is fill. The next one I'm going to select is leading. And basically what leading does is the leading edge of each element is aligned to the leading edge of the stack view, and the size of my labels revert back to their original sizes. The next one is center, which that's how it was set up. So when you specify center, the center of each element is aligned to the center of the stack view, and the size of the labels are as they currently are. The size is not affected. And trailing does the opposite of leading. So if I select trailing, the trailing edge of each element is aligned to the trailing edge of the stack view. So that's what has been done, and the size, the width of my labels were not changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it back to center. So what we're going to look at next is distribution, which defines how the elements are distributed within the stack view. So currently, you'll notice that we do have a spacing set to 20, so there is 20 spaces between each one of our labels. So the first one I'm going to select is fill, and that's what it's currently set at. So the stack view resizes the arranged subviews so that they fill all the available space along the axis you specified. And the stack view sizes the first label as large as possible to completely fill the stack. So that's why my first label is sized improportionately to my other labels, is it uses that first label to go ahead and fill up the rest of the space. Since I've set my size of my stack, the height of my stack, to be 30 pixels. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and select fill equally. So let me just go ahead and select that. So when I select fill equally, the stack view resizes the arranged subviews so that they fill all the available space along the axis. The views are resized so that they are all the same size along the stack view's axis. So the one thing I want to note is if I go ahead and decrease the size of my spacing, you can actually see the the label's height does grow. So let me go ahead and change this back to 20, what we originally set it to. Okay, the next one is fill proportionately, and in this, the stack view resizes the arranged subviews so that they fill all the available space along the axis. If the size of the stack view changes, the views are resized proportionately to one another. So if two labels have heights of 50 and 100 respectively, and you increase the stack view's height by 50%, the labels then have heights of 75 and 150. So let me just go ahead and set it to fill proportionately. So now we've gone ahead and we've changed that, and you can kind of see that our bottom label size has now been extended versus our top label. The next one is equal spacing. In that, the stack view doesn't resize the subviews but positions them at an equal distance from one another. So let me go ahead and change that to equal spacing. So what it's done is now my height reverts back to the original height that they were set at. And what they are is there's equal distance from one another. And then equal centering, what happens there, nothing should change here. When I hit that, it should remain the same. The stack view doesn't resize the subviews, but ensures that the center of each subview is an equal distance to the centers of the other subview. Okay, so that is distribution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and set it equal to fill. So again, it's changed back. Our initial label has been resized to fill the necessary space, and then the bottom four labels are their original size with 20 spacing in between each of the labels. So spacing just describes the amount of space between each element in the stack view. So if I would go ahead and change my spacing to 0, then what it'll do is it'll go ahead and continue to expand my top label so that it fills up the stack size that I've my stack height. So my top label is the largest label in height, and the other three labels height does not change. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change my distribution to fill equally, and if I go ahead and click on that, so now you can see when I change that, each one of my labels is the same size. It'll fill my size so to 300, so we have 5 labels. So let me just go ahead and see if that's happening. So if I check the height of my label, it is 60, so each one of my labels has been resized to 60, and I do not have any space between any of spacing has been set to 0, so all my labels have been resized. The height has been resized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my distribution back to fill. And the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and use the size inspector to remove the height constraint on my stack view. So let me make sure I have my stack view selected, and then I will go into my size inspector, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and delete this item. So I'll just go ahead and select it and hit the delete key. And then after I delete that item, what happens is my stack view shrinks down to basically it's the sum of my 5 label heights. So if I go ahead and check the height of it, it is 102.5. If I select one of my labels, it has a height of 20.5. So that's how we get that 100.5, is we just sum up the height of our 5 labels. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and change my spacing now for my label. So I've selected my stack view. As you can see, my height is 102.5. What I want to do is I want to add 20 spaces in between each one of my labels. So I will update my spacing, hit enter. Now you can see the stack view's height has increased, and so that there's those 20 spaces have been added. So I think it was at 102.5. If I go in to check the height of my stack now, it should be 182.5. So what it did is it added 20 pixels 4 times. So each one of my labels is set 20 pixels from one another in the specific stack. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video about stack views. So we will go ahead and talk to you later.